The killer Samuel Little will remain etched in the minds of Americans, as he is not just an ordinary murderer but the worst serial killer in the history of the United States. Let's get to know him first. Samuel Little was born on June 7, 1940, in Reynolds, Georgia, to a mother he claimed was a prostitute. Shortly after his birth, his family moved to Lorain, Ohio, where he was raised by his grandmother. He attended Hawthorne Junior High School but had issues with discipline and performance. In 1956, Little was sent to a juvenile detention center after being convicted of breaking and entering in Omaha. In his late 20s, Little moved to Florida to live with his mother and worked in jobs close to death and blood, such as a cemetery worker and an ambulance attendant. He started traveling frequently and got into more trouble with the law, getting arrested in 8 different states on charges ranging from driving under the influence and armed robbery to solicitation, shoplifting, aggravated assault, and rape. Little claimed he practiced boxing while in prison, referring to himself as a former fighter. In 1961, Little was sentenced to 3 years in prison for breaking into a furniture store in Lorain. By 1975, he had been arrested 26 times in 11 states for crimes including theft, assault, attempted rape, fraud, and assaulting government officials. In 1982, Little was arrested in Pascagoula, Mississippi, and charged with the murder of 22-year-old Melinda Rose LaPree, who had disappeared in September of that year. The jury declined to indict him for her murder. However, during the investigation, he was extradited to Florida and tried for the murder of 26-year-old Patricia Ann Mount, whose body was found in September 1982. Witnesses identified Little as having spent time with Mount the night before her disappearance, but he was acquitted in January 1984 due to doubts about the witnesses' credibility. Little then moved to California and settled near San Diego in October 1984, where he was arrested for kidnapping and strangling 22-year-old Lori Barros, who survived. A month later, police found Little in the back seat of his car with an unconscious woman who had been beaten and strangled in the same location as Barros' attempted murder. He served 2.5 years for both crimes, and upon his release in February 1987, he immediately moved to Los Angeles and committed 10 more murders. Little was arrested on September 5, 2012, at a homeless shelter in Louisville, Kentucky, and extradited to California to face a drug trafficking charge. Authorities then tested his DNA to prove his involvement in the murders of Carol Elford, killed on July 13, 1987, Guadalupe Apodaca, killed on September 3, 1987, and Audrey Nelson Everett, killed on August 14, 1989. Little was sent to Los Angeles and charged on January 7, 2013. Months later, police announced that Little was being investigated for his involvement in 30 previously unsolved murders from the 1980s. This led to the reopening of the LaPree murder case and an examination of Little's connection to 93 murders of women throughout his criminal career. In September 2014, Little was tried solely for the murders of Elford, Nelson, and Apodaca, based on DNA evidence and witness testimonies from individuals he had attacked at different times. On September 25, 2014, he was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Little continued to insist on his innocence until he eventually confessed to all the crimes. He targeted women who were addicts, lived alone, or were homeless, ensuring their disappearances went unnoticed. Little committed 93 murders between 1970 and 2005 across 14 states, although police have only identified 50 victims. The FBI released sketches of several of Little's victims to help identify them. Samuel Little died in a California state prison in Ohio at the age of 80 on December 30, 2020, leaving behind the title of the most prolific serial killer in U.S. history.